It's just a simple ride. You'll get off, and then you'll get on to the train. It's that simple. Whatever decision you make, you will make it to the party. As your eyes wander around the station, you're looking for something, anything, to grab your mind off the future. Something, you're not quite sure what, sits by your side as you wait for the train. You look. They look familiar, but different. They sound familiar, too. Distant, but familiar. And nevertheless, you both start a conversation. And in the back of your mind, you think, it's a nice distraction before your ride. Yet, despite that, there's a singular question that bubbles every so often. What are you really doing here? And why? It is that question that Afterparty by Rookery Games got me thinking about. What are you doing here, and why are we here? I don't mean that in the logistical, I am here because of so-and-so reasons. I mean it in the spiritual and metaphysical sense. Why are we on this rock at this time, and how do we cope with all of that? So in this video, I'll be discussing my experiences playing through a small portion of Afterparty. So, grab your cups of tea, find your journal with all of your deepest, darkest feelings and grief, and turn up the music for our post-party declaration that is known as Afterparty V.2. Afterparty is a collaborative tabletop role-playing game made by Rookery Games, and, as stated on itch.io, is a collection of 6 game poems. Play them in any order for an evening of playful bereavement. And this left me confused. How can a bereavement be playful? The game, on first glance, raised more questions than answers, but I wanted to dive into it with an open mind. So when I got this game as part of several other bundles, I thought it'd be a creative exercise to explore a new way of playing tabletop role-playing games. The overarching story of each of the games is about bereavement, and the multiple shapes and ways that can take place. You are going to write, talk through, and experience those moments the games set up. These prompts can range from 1 person to 6 people, and the games give you the safety tools and precautions necessary on how, where, and when to play. The game even states, this is a collection of game poems about grief and death. Gameplay will involve these topics, so please play only if you feel safe to look grief in the eye. There are other additions as well, such as, ahead of time, prepare a soft spot for post-game landing. Choose care for yourself and others. Do not tolerate harm towards any participant. Exile any who set out to cause harm. Or my personal favorite, participate only to the extent of your comfort. The game doesn't say to not challenge your feelings on bereavement and death. Rather, you want to contribute to the conversation to the best of your ability. To do so, you have to have safety tools in place, and you have to be cautious, but also considerate to not only your heart, but to the hearts of other people at the table. I think setting up any game, especially when it deals with heavy topics like that, is setting yourself up for success and a great time for exploration on your feelings, thoughts, and experiences with loss. There are 6 games in Afterparty, each with their own unique drawing, soundtrack, and representation of loss, change, and confronting the unknown. These games invite us into a deeper conversation on death and dealing with that. And for the sake of the creators, as well as time constraints, I won't spoil the other games since you can get the game via itch.io. So instead, I'll focus on my experiences with Last Train to give you an idea of what this game tackles. Last Train is the first game in Afterparty. It is made for 1 player. The game is about a decision you are struggling with. Picture you are making this decision while you're waiting for the train, and this train will take you forward. As you wait though, you meet a familiar looking stranger. This stranger is a version of you who is older, wiser, and more understanding than the present you. This strange time between waiting is a moment for conversation between the present and future self. The question then comes down to whether the present self takes the train or not. Whatever choice you make, the soundtrack determines the length of the game. When you start the music, or at a 50-minute timer, the conversation begins. The conversation comes to a close when the music ends and the train arrives. Last Train, for me, was uncomfortable. It was uncomfortable to talk to myself, and one side representing the unknowable future, and one side representing my current self. And I think it was unnerving because it challenged me on how important decision making really was. I started to ask questions like this: how will this new job affect me? Is it right to go and travel here? Who will take care of my family and siblings and loved ones if something happens to me? What will I do about the bills I have in a few months? Who's going to check up on my friends when I'm gone? What will happen to my creative exploits when I'm gone? Where will I go if everything goes to crap? Am I actually making the right decision? Or is it all just nonsense? Should I just stay where I'm at, professionally, academically, personally? And better yet, will it all work out? And if so, will I be there to see it? The game poem put this and many of these other questions into perspective, and it reminded me that firstly, when we are faced with difficult decisions, you are going to struggle. And I think Last Train instills that into a game. Tabletop games are about the decisions we make, the consequences that come from them, and the stories that come from those consequences via the mechanics and everyone else coming to the table. Likewise, Last Train frames our conversations between the present and future as uncomfortable but needed conversations because, just like with a game, you need to struggle through some difficult conversations, especially when you deal with grief and loss and change. For example, the death of a loved one is recognized as one of the most stressful life events in the human experience for quite some time among psychosomatic and psychological research. Holmes and Raff, in their 1967 paper titled The Social Readjustment Rating Scale, talk about this on a deeper level if you want to check that out. Other research discusses how, following the death of a loved one, morbidity can increase. This includes cardiovascular events, vascular disease, incidences of cancer, and self-reported hypertension. So, it's not a shocker that losing someone deeply to you or to your community will leave you feeling emotionally, physically, and psychologically vulnerable. Obviously, loss doesn't just mean death, but means so many other things in the context of what we're talking about. When the person or people you love are gone, you are only really left the icons that remind you of them. You have to process the present and the unknown, even if it is difficult and scary. Moving away from psychological research, let's go into the literary element. C.S. Lewis writes deeply on grief and bereavement following the death of his wife, Joy Davidman. In 1960, C.S. Lewis and Joy married relatively late in life, and after Joy had been diagnosed with terminal cancer, he wrote his book discussing that loss and how he dealt with it. To add, the marriage had a lot of furor amongst C.S. Lewis's friends and community. Lewis was a bachelor, nearly 60 years older, and married a woman who is 40, which for the time period was not the norm. She was an American divorcee, secondly, and thirdly, Joy was also Jewish and had 2 kids from a prior marriage. So, for the harsh hetero-Christian sensibilities of the 60s, this wasn't exactly something that Lewis or Joy wanted to deal with. So, when Joy did pass away, it was tough for Lewis, and that's why he wrote this book, to process all of the experiences, moments, and icons that reminded him of his partner. And C.S. Lewis is highly known as a Christian author. Much of his fantasy book is inspired by Christianity and his spirituality. And this quote about icons and about how they affected his perception is important, and I'll break down. All reality is iconoclastic. The earthly beloved, even in this life, incessantly triumphs over your mere idea of her. And you want her to. You want her with all her resistances, all her faults, all her unexpectedness. That is, in her foursquare and independent reality. And this, not any image or memory, is what we are to love still. after she is dead. What this means is that reality and our experiences break down the people we love. Reality, especially while we mourn their death or loss or disappearance, takes us away from looking at the people we love as icons. Instead, we see them for who they are and what they meant to us despite the bereavement. These icons are a reflection of them and are a reminder of them in our lives. And for Lewis, joy was an icon to him. Images, pictures, photos, items in his apartment, in his houses, were representations of their love. And if I'm interpreting this correctly, these icons could even be interpreted as blasphemous, which for Lewis is pretty shocking. But you might think, I'm not religious, or maybe you aren't Christian, so none of this matters to you, but I would digress. Everyone has icons or symbols or people that they hold on to, and those images, pictures, pieces of technology remind you of them, of that community. And moving back to Last Train, this game poem is about challenging the icons we set our future selves up for. How we sometimes will hold ourselves or others to the highest regard, but when the person we aim to be or someone who you love deeply disappears, we're just left their icons. That could be a family photo of you all playing at the beach. That could be the time you beat your brother at a video game on your console. This could be a dizzying time at an amusement park, or it could be the moment you held each other when things got tough. It is that present moment you have to sit with reality. Yes, it hurts. Yes, it's tough. And I'll be honest, it feels impossible. The grief feels so strong and powerful and over-encompassing. Yet, we hold on to those icons until we're ready to move on, however long that might take. We understand that Last Train is dealing with multiple ideas like icons, grief, and what does that look like talking to your past and present and future. But why trains? I think trains are an obvious symbol of movement, and this can take many shapes. As stated, through literary and visual representations, artists have imagined a train as a contradictory symbol of both modern anxiety and potential freedom. Furthermore, the spaces associated with trains have increasingly become a privileged object of attention as the projects of urban planners and political regimes have sought to control their populations. Moreover, the spaces of train travel are interest to other perspectives, such as feminism and even network theory. This is from Trains, Literature, and Culture, Reading and Riding the Rails. A train and train station are a setting where you are moving, and what that represents can be so many things. Maybe you are moving forward after picking up a new job. Possibly you're dealing with a big family confrontation and you're waiting for the train to get you there. A train could symbolize your inability to move on from a decision, so for this game, I think it's meant to be a double-edged sword. Trains can be a pathway towards new adventures, journeys, and beautiful moments in your life. But they're also about you leaving your past in the past and stepping forward with all of that grief and pain. And as we can see in media, trains can reflect a number of things. It could be growing up in childhood innocence from, say, the Polar Express. It could be about a quest for identity and understanding yourself despite gender and societal pressures. Some Like It Hot in 1959. Trains can be places of isolation and danger, which flips their typical roles as being modes of transportation. Think of horror movies like Scream 6, or action movies like Trans-Siberian in 2008. Trains can, of course, just be about transitioning into a new you, and because someone better and different through their trip. Think of Infinity Train. What I'm trying to say from this long-winded point, Rookery Games' location can hold many meanings for many players. Trains can be exciting. You are heading off to somewhere new, or even if it's not new, somewhere different, and there's bound to be something exciting. That also means a future you cannot predict, situations you are not prepared for, losses that will hurt both the people you left behind, but also you, who has to bear that weight. Yet, you have to deal with it, even if you don't have a clear answer, even if everything seems confusing, and especially if you're confused on why you're doing this, and if it's worth it, as we asked earlier in the video. Afterparty is a wonderful example of a tabletop game that is pushing the boundaries of what it can be. It is about the feelings that arrive between others and what does that look like when you grow apart. It is about saying goodbye, saying see you later, and it's about celebrating those precious moments that you experience between each other. Also, this game has a wonderful soundtrack for each of its 6 games. That alone is a seller for me. You should be able to get the game bundle over here on itch.io. Also, this game is in many bundles on itch and will likely be in more. So if you're interested in looking for that, check out itch.io. After writing my small little story and processing my feelings, I can say one thing for sure. All of us will deal with loss. If you're watching this and have lost someone's left your life, or there are people that you miss, then know you aren't alone. Hundreds, thousands of people will deal with that exact same feeling. But your experiences are you. The icons you have in your life, the people you go to talk to for support, your experience of grief is as beautiful and sad and joyous as anyone else's experience. And it's allowed to be complicated, it's allowed to be messy, it's allowed to be goofy, and it's even allowed to be playful. Thus, in this journey on our last train, what are you really doing here and why? I don't know. And I really don't know why I'm here either. But one thing I do know for sure, don't forget to say goodbye on your last train. Also, when you are done, why don't you check out this lovely video on Moonlight on Roswell Beach if you're looking for some pulpy queer goodness. Finally, a special shout out to my Patreon supporters, Harrison Parker and Paul Volpe, for continued support. You help keep this channel running, and you too can support my Patreon over here, and my coffee over here. If not, feel free to like and subscribe, and check out my Blue Sky down below in the description box amongst all my other links. There you can keep in contact with me if you want to. And as always, I'm your average everyday queer, sad boy. Blurted disposition of y'all. Have an awesome day. Ciao.